All right, folks, welcome back. I mentioned to you when we had Louis Gohmert on yesterday, congressman from Texas, that he had accompanied a delegation, a congressional delegation to the Middle East, to Egypt, on a fact-finding mission, among other things, to document the persecution of the Copts in Egypt. Christian persecution, Christian killings. We talk about this almost every day on this show, and I'm proud of that, because I just can't imagine that this is not a national conversation. It should be. And certainly one group that is trying to get the president, the State Department more involved in this problem is the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. And we're joined right now by the chairman of that group, Dr. Robert P. George. Hello, doctor. How are you?
I'm very well, Steve. It's good to be on your show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
And thanks for talking about this every day. The whole country needs to be talking about this. This is an issue the whole world needs to be talking about.
I just can't fathom it, because to me it's inconceivable that this could be happening, and as a Jew, it's inconceivable that this could be happening. And I know full well that if this were the other way around, and it would never be in this day and age, but if it were the other way around, I'm completely, unequivocally sure that the media, the State Department, the president would be covering this and speaking out and keeping track and having reports, and how could this be, and these evil Christians. But there's silence.
Yeah, there's too much silence. But we at the Commission on International Religious Freedom are certainly not being silent. We're speaking out on this, and we're urging our own government to take some steps here to put pressure on the Egyptian authorities to start protecting that Coptic minority. That's a lot of people. There are 8 million people. They're very vulnerable people, among the most vulnerable people in the world to violent religious persecution. We've seen it with attacks on churches, attacks on businesses, attacks on individuals. And we need our own government, and we need European governments and other Western governments to join in putting some pressure on the Egyptian regime to protect the Coptic minority. We at the Commission have recommended that military aid to Egypt now be conditional upon steps being taken to protect the Coptic minority. That aid should be withheld starting now, unless the Egyptian regime starts to protect its own people.
Now, you wrote a letter, I think a week ago or so, to the president urging the action. And have you gotten any response?
No, we haven't gotten a response yet. Now, of course, that's not unusual. The president is a busy man; he's got lots of things to do.
Right. He's going to be, as a matter of fact, not to interrupt, but in a few minutes, he's going to be interviewed by Bill Clinton at the Clinton Foundation, talking about health care. So, yes, very pressing issues.
But we did write. I wrote to the president on behalf of my fellow commissioners on September 12th, and we urged him to speak out more forcefully on this issue. We reminded the president that our commission has recommended a formal designation under the International Religious Freedom Act of Egypt as a country of particular concern. If that were done, that would immediately trigger some consequences. And we do, again, recommend that the administration withhold military aid to Egypt until it takes steps that it could take. The Egyptian regime could begin taking steps tomorrow. This is not difficult to stop impunity, violence with impunity by extremist mobs against Coptic Christians and other religious minorities. Now, we're right to put a lot of emphasis on the Copts, but let's remember there are other Christian minorities and there are other minorities. There are Sufis,
right.
People of other Baha'is who have been persecuted in Egypt. The Copts are a very large minority and a very vulnerable minority. But we've got religious persecution going on really across the board in Egypt, and it has to end. And remember, this is an ally of ours. This is an ally of the United States. This is not a rogue nation we have no influence with. So let's begin using our influence to protect this fundamental right that we Americans cherish of religious freedom.
Now, we're talking to Dr. Robert George, chairman of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. The people, for the most part, that are harming the Christians and the minorities in Egypt today, would I be correct in saying that it's not the Egyptian military, it's not the people who have assumed power, although they may not be protecting as much as they should, but it's the ousted Muslim Brotherhood and their supporters?
We are very concerned that Muslim Brotherhood members and leaders have tolerated and even encouraged this kind of extremist mob violence against innocent people. Now, having said that, and it's very important to say that because you have to name names, you have to say what's really going on here, We also need to acknowledge that there have been many good Muslims in Egypt who have tried to protect their Coptic fellow citizens, who've stood guard around churches and businesses and so forth. And we want to, of course, continue to encourage that. And we don't want to sweep with too broad a brush as if all Muslims here are guilty. They're not. But Muslim Brotherhood members and leaders have sometimes tolerated and sometimes even actively encouraged the violence that we're seeing against religious minorities, beginning with the Copts, but including the Baha'is and the Sufis and others.
And describe for the audience some of the more egregious acts of violence and acts of persecution that the various factions under attack have suffered.
Well, attacks on their churches, to begin with, the burning of churches, for example, attacks on businesses that are owned by members of these minorities, especially the Copts. And, of course, then acts on directly against individuals. I mean, innocent people minding their own business who suddenly find themselves confronted by a mob and are beaten, sometimes even killed. It's really a horrific situation. And remember, these are not people who arrived in Egypt yesterday. This is an ancient community in Egypt. They themselves trace themselves to Pharaonic origin. This comes from the earliest days of Christianity. The Coptic faith is one of the Eastern Orthodox traditions dating back to some of the earliest days of Christianity. This is an ancient Egyptian community.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and the support you talk about the administration in your letter to Obama, but obviously the congressional delegation who went over, although it was small in number, do they represent the wishes of the Congress? Are you getting support from the congressional members?
Well, we're certainly grateful for the support from people like Louis Gohmert, who you mentioned led the delegation, who are attentive to the issue and paying attention to the issue. On both sides of the aisle, by the way, there are real leaders in the Congress who are trying to take action here. But the real action we need immediately is not something that a congressman really can do. What we need is for the administration to speak out, president to speak out, and we need steps to be taken. We would really like this recommendation to be accepted of conditioning any further assistance, especially military assistance, on concrete steps being taken, which can be taken tomorrow. This is not difficult, as I said, by the Egyptian government to begin protecting its Coptic minority.
And I got one more for you, Dr. George, and that is these kinds of attacks are not unique, unfortunately, to Egypt. They've been going on for some time around the Middle East, around parts of Africa, and it's usually radical Islamic Muslims or fundamentalists or Al Qaeda or Muslim Brotherhood. Again, never meant to paint with a broad brush, insinuating that it's all Muslims, but the victims are, in this particular case, I'm talking about the Christians, where there are dwindling minorities in these various countries. I mean, look at the church attack in Pakistan just Sunday. So this is
that was a horrible attack.
Yeah.
On All Saints Church in Peshawar, Pakistan.
And this is this is pervasive, around that whole region.
We are very concerned on the plight of Christians across the Middle East. These ancient Christian communities, very important traditional Christian communities, are disappearing from the Middle East. If we look at Iraq, of course, we've been talking about Egypt. You just mentioned, of course, the attacks on Christians in Pakistan. Christians are being victimized throughout the Middle East, and they're leaving. Many of the Iraqi Christians fled to Syria. Now Syrian Christians, including some of those Iraqi Christians, as well as the native Syrian Christians, of course, are having to flee the nightmare that they're experiencing there. So this is a terrible thing. But it's part of a still larger phenomenon, Steve, and that is worldwide religious persecution. Now, it's true in many cases across the world, victims are Christians. It's true in China. That's true in North Korea. But there are victims of other faiths as well. The Falun Gong in China, for example, are victims.
Right.
Buddhists are often victims. And we must remember there are many places in which Muslims themselves are victims.
From other Muslims usually, though, correct?
Well, I wouldn't say usually, but sometimes that's certainly the case. Internal disputes within the Islamic world. But look, for example, at the persecution by non-Muslims of the Rohingya, the Buddhists in Myanmar. I'm sorry, the Muslims in Myanmar. They're among the most brutally persecuted people in the world, and they are Muslims who are being persecuted by non-Muslims. We in the United States need to be standing up for religious freedom across the globe, and it doesn't matter who the victims are.
We were
freedom is freedom for everybody.
We were founded on that principle.
We are founded on that. Exactly right. If you look at our Bill of Rights, the very first principle, the very first freedom mentioned before the great freedoms of speech and assembly and the press is the free exercise of religion, and we have to stand up for that.
Absolutely. Listen, anytime you need this microphone, sir, feel free, and I'm sure we'll call on you again too.
Well, thank you for letting me be on the show, and I, again, applaud you for speaking up on this issue and informing the public. And please, all of Steve's listeners, let the administration know that it's time for strong action. It's time to call the Egyptian government to account to protect its Coptic minority and other minorities.
You would think that there would be a no-brainer for people to be outraged, but I guess they got to see it on TV first, and now they're hearing it, and some are seeing it on Newsmax TV. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Bye-bye. Dr. Robert P. George, Chairman of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. We keep hearing, how many times have you heard during the immigration debate, we're a nation of immigrants? Well, what they mean, and I believe what our president means, is illegals. Look at us. Look at everybody who's here. We don't care how they got here. We're a nation of immigrants. First of all, I'm not an immigrant. My mother wasn't an immigrant. My mother isn't an immigrant. My father wasn't an immigrant. May he rest in peace. My grandparents were immigrants. So I'm not an immigrant. And I don't know what he talks about or what they mean when they say we're a nation of immigrants. But let's take that, okay? In the beginning, sure, the United States was a nation of immigrants. And why? Yes, we were, we were separating ourselves from a repressive, monarchy. But why did people come here? Why did people come here from the beginning? To escape religious persecution. So you would think that we as a government, we as a people, we as a media who reports on every cockamamie issue you could come up with would grab this and not let it go. It's a little more important than Miley Cyrus or Justin Bieber or what Cher thinks about both of them. We have people being killed, again, focusing here on the Christians, because they're Christians all over the world. In one part of the world, in many parts of the world, but the usual perpetrators are Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, radical Islamic fundamentalist Muslims. And that's why I believe everybody's silent. How can that be? How do Christians? I'd love to hear from you, if you are a Christian of any denomination, any follow any form of Christianity. Why are you so silent? As a group, like I said, I'm Jewish, okay, and I'm doing my best here because it's heartfelt. Because I would hope that everybody else would get on board. If it were Jews, again, being slaughtered, and persecuted in that way. But I don't get it. We're a Judeo-Christian nation. We have, maybe 100 million Christians in this country, maybe more, probably more. I don't know the number. And where are they? Where is the outrage? Where's the March on Washington? Where are the Christian leaders coming forward and saying this has got to stop? That's why I love Bill Donahue so much, the head of the Catholic League. Now, he usually speaks up on Catholic issues, but, we talked about the killing of the cops and others around the world. But he's head of the Catholic League. And Catholics are silent on most issues. God bless Bill, he speaks his mind. I'm just amazed at I don't know, maybe it's a lack of education. Maybe not enough people know. But I got a feeling not enough people care, and I don't get that. So tell me what you think the problem is, especially if you're of the Christian faith. 855-777-9660, 855-777-9. I like doing that. 9660. I'd love to hear from you right here. Steve Malzberg on the Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax TV and radio.
The Steve Malzberg Show.